if you're hanging out with people that have the qualities that you want, you will develop those qualities. Show me your friends, I'll show you your future. Your association is everything. We must surround ourselves with the people who are doing the thing we want to do. And then through osmosis, we start to develop those qualities.
Welcome to Inspired by Success, the podcast where I deep dive into the mindset of successful entrepreneurs, CEOs, and thought leaders. Get ready to be inspired and gain valuable insights to unlock your true potential. Okay, today we're diving into the inspiring journey of Madhu Dasa, a holistic lifestyle coach and a former monk whose journey began in a family deeply rooted in yoga teachings. At the age of 16, he found ancient wisdom and had a spiritual awakening, leading him into monkhood on his 18th birthday. Transitioning from monastery to entrepreneurship, Madhu aimed to merge spiritual teachings with modern-day life. Through dedication, Madhu Life came to be, a platform blending spiritual and practical wisdom. Today, he offers priceless advice on bringing spirituality into our daily routines. I am super excited to have you, Madhu. Welcome to the show.
Oh, grateful to be here with you. And thank you for creating such a wonderful space for us to get together and actually get to talk about important stuff.
Exactly. Yeah, I'm super excited for this. Tell us about your story and why did you decide to become a monk at 18? Most kids are out there doing, sports, gaming, all other things. But what made you to decide to choose the path of monastery?
Yeah, you're telling me that young kids don't want to become celibate and shave their head and only wear robes? Well, what happened was I was always curious about philosophy and theology, and I was studying different ancient wisdoms from 16 onwards. Even before that, I was studying Western philosophy and different Abrahamic theological practices. And so after 16, when I started to get my hands on we'd like to say juicy books, like books that are ancient, that are steeped in philosophy and the conceptions of self, the conceptions of this world, conceptions of divinity, etc. As I started to explore those, I realized there was something better than what I was doing, which was just going to college and for something I didn't really want to do, and living in a box with doing things I didn't really want to do with a bunch of possessions. There was just this idea of I don't really want what everyone's got going on. So when I was 17, I wanted to become a monk. And so I started going to different monasteries. No one would let me because I was a minor, which I'm happy about. But eventually, after traveling a lot to different types of ashrams and monasteries, I found there's one particular practice called Bhakti yoga, which stood out obviously above the others, specifically for the logical explanation of life, the soul, the self, divinity, etc. And so on my 18th birthday, I was like, let's do it. Shaved my head, started wearing robes and waking up at 3:30 in the morning. And very unusual, that's for sure.
Tell us about that, why you chose that specific Bhakti yoga compared different forms of yoga teachings. I'm still new to the different world of yoga. Yeah. So as a beginner, just tell us why.
Yeah, I too am a beginner. And so there's different processes of yoga, and yoga literally is a Sanskrit word that means to yoke. We have the same word in English. It's because English comes from Latin, which comes from Sanskrit. Yoke turns into, or yuk turns into yoke, which means to connect or to link. And so the idea of yoga is to link up with something of substance, and usually it's referring to divinity. So divine connection is the easiest way to understand the principles of yoga. There's traditionally 4 step ladders of yoga, and we're not going to go so deep into each individual one, but you have what's called karma yoga, which everyone's familiar with this term. Karma literally means action. And so therefore in the West, we think of karma as reaction because every action has a reaction. You have karma yoga, which means you engage all your activities in service. You have jnana yoga, which means engaging your intellect in connection. You have dhyana, which means engaging through meditation. So like this, there's different types of yoga practices, but all of them culminate in bhakti, which is a Sanskrit term that means love and devotion. And they say that in ancient yoga literatures, these wisdom texts from the East, it talks about there's nothing higher than love and devotion in this world. And so therefore, all of these others are important, but they're always second in terms of engaging your actions, your intellect, spending time through meditation, sacrifices, austerities, etc. They're helpful, but nothing is ever as important as doing bhakti or pure love, pure service from a space of love and devotion. And so what stood out about that for me is I was hanging out with these people, and you could tell they were actually just motivated by service. And there was such a freedom, there's such a joy when they would talk about these things. And I was like, okay, whatever you have, I want some. I'm buying it.
Was there any pivotal, sometimes people make changes through a pivotal moment in their life? Was there something that you were down about or just unhappy about before you decided to do this journey?
Yeah, I've been diagnosed with kind of like all the things that could diagnose me with. I had like a reading disability and ADHD and anxiety. And for years I pushed off taking any medication, but I remember it was like a psychiatrist and psychologist were like, you got to take all these drugs. And I was like, all right, I guess I'm broken. I got to take all this medicine. And so I was taking a lot of things to deal with what I was learning was a problem. Later only to find out it's part of the superpower per se that many of us have is there's different unique psychologies and different ways that our minds work, and there's not necessarily a wrong brain. But anyway, I was struggling with all of these feelings, and ultimately I was faced with the reality of death. And that is that there's only a few things that are guaranteed in this life. And one thing that's guaranteed for us all is that there is an end. And I was so, bothered. I'd be like, I don't know, what is death? Like, what is life? What is death? Like what, we just do all this to die? Like, how freaking bleak is that? And so I was really keen to understand, like what is the purpose of this life? Why would we even want to do it if we know it's all going to end? And then ultimately to learn aspects of these ancient traditions, which talk about we're eternal. We don't just, when this body dies, we don't just go into oblivion, nothingness, as they call this philosophical suicide, the idea that when it's done, everything's just done. Rather, these ancient Eastern traditions teach that the soul transmigrates from body to body. And it's a whole nother conversation we get into, but every 7 years, every cell in our body is completely regenerating. In other words, we're taking new carne on, we're reincarnating every 7 years. So the idea is that even when the body itself always keeps changing, even when the body's done, the soul, the witnesser of the body that changes, the witnesser of the mind that changes, continues on.
Wow, that's very deep and interesting. So it's very interesting how you transition from monkhood to entrepreneurship as well. Talk us a little bit about that, and what were some of the biggest challenges that you faced as well? Because that's just totally different. You know, a monk has like no possessions, no like attachments. Is that right? But you transition from the monkhood to entrepreneurship. So that's very interesting. Tell us what was some of the challenges that you
also
faced?
unusual. That's for sure.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Well, what happened was, as a monk, as you mentioned, no possessions. We literally, the cool thing was we had one hairdo, we had one, even the robes, it's like one size fits all orange robes. You just kind of tie, and you never have to worry about what color you're wearing tomorrow or what hairdo, or, it's a very simple life. And I remember I would travel just out of a backpack, and let me talk about freedom. Oh, you want to feel wealthy? Figure out how to live out of a backpack and be comfortable anywhere. There's a type of luxury in that, actually. It sounds counterintuitive, but there's a freedom in just knowing you can go anywhere and do whatever you want and be okay. That's what you learn as a monk. And so after graduating the monastery, I realized that it was not feasible for me to just live out of a backpack, especially I wanted a partner. It was time. It was, after 5 years of celibacy, I was like, I'd like a partner. I'd like a friend. I want a best friend that isn't another dude and that's a monk.
Wait, can I just stop you on that for a second?
Yeah,
I've always wanted to know, how do monks become celibate? They take that commitment for the rest of their lives? Is that a detachment thing?
Well, it's very few monks that go on for the rest of their life. So in the West, we usually have this conception somebody takes a vow and then forever, but that's only about 1%, max 2% of people who become monks. Most are student monks that will only be for a certain amount of time, 1, 2, 5, 10, 15 years, like that. And then we transition or graduate to become a normal person. And the whole idea is you learn the principles so that you can take them into this quote unquote real world. That's the ideology. And so, I was like, what do I do now? I got this isn't going to work living out of the backpack. And so I was like, I got to make some money. So for about 2 years, I just lived off of donations, and it was tough. I made about $15,000 the first year, about $18,000 the next, which is far, far, far below the poverty line. And it was a very simple life, but it was very unsustainable. And then eventually I realized this isn't going to work. Like, I know, okay, I'm happy with my spiritual life. I'm happy with my health. We learned everything about Eastern holistic health, happy with relationships in my life. Like, the one thing I'm not happy with is I ain't got no money. And I had developed that monk concept of I want to be free of possessions. But what happened was knowledge is power, and it has influence. And I learned that what you could do with money. I always had this idea money's bad, which is completely wrong. Money is neutral. Just like a knife isn't good or bad. It can be used by a surgeon to save a life. It can be used by someone to kill someone. Money, similarly, isn't good or bad. it's used to amplify what's on someone's mind. The more money they have, you just understand the person. If somebody does something bad with money, that's the
They're going to
person's
keep
issue.
doing,
And I
exactly.
was learning this, and I was like, oh, okay, I have to use resources. I got to figure out how to make some money. And then that's when I was like, let me start with what I know. I did an India pilgrimage because I had lived in India. So I was like, let me take people to India. And then first time in my life, I made $20,000 for 2 weeks of a pilgrimage. And I realized, okay, this is crazy. I'm the only thing getting in my way. I can make money. My mind is the only thing stopping me. And that's when I was like, okay, I got to take this serious. And I started learning sales, marketing, getting into coaching, holistic health, blah, blah, blah. And then from there, created first a 6-figure business. And we kept growing and doubling, growing and doubling. And that's what got me to today, where now I help others create 6- and 7-figure holistic businesses as well.
Yeah, I realized I was going to ask you that question. So how did you create a 7-figure business from scratch? Like, walk us through some of the steps that got you there.
Well, what I'll share is slightly counterintuitive, but it's the same principle we learn as a monk, and that is service first. That is the purpose of life, is to contribute and serve, not to be a taker. You actually find that the most miserable people are people who are being served without the opportunity to reciprocate. They actually done studies of happiest people, and some of the happiest people in the world are new mamas, even if they've had children before, but like mamas who have infants. And it's very counterintuitive, because how all you're doing is exhausting yourself to nurture and love and take care of someone who's not able to reciprocate. Moms will hate me for saying, moms go, no, my baby reciprocates. I know. I mean to say they can't even communicate in reciprocation. So how is that the happiest? It's because service is the most important thing. When we have the mood, the internal desire to actually just be of service, and we take that as our purpose, then we can actually make an impact. So as that translates to business, we have a model where, I mean, honestly, I give all my content away for free. I just share all my course, tens of thousands of dollars worth of course. We just give everything away. And then what happens is people inevitably, when you change enough people's lives, people want to give back. And then from there, we started small, helping a handful of people. And then from there we grew, and then we just kind of kept growing. We have a whole system called the conscious closing method, which means how to grow in this conscious way without ever having to use manipulation, sales tactics, like the slimy car salesman per se. Like, how do you actually sell from a place of integrity where you never break your vows, your values, and you actually change people's lives without ever being desperate for money? You're content, you're good, and therefore you create an opportunity for money to come in, and then it does. I mean, that's the short answer. We could talk a lot about this though.
So yeah, that's fascinating. So tell us, what practices or exercises do you recommend for busy entrepreneurs to achieve mental clarity and focus? And also, how do they balance between ambition and also having inner peace? Because most entrepreneurs are definitely driven, ambitious people, but how do you find that balance? Because along with all that comes stress and anxiety and whatnot. So how do you recommend mental clarity and focus, but also inner peace?
Absolutely. Well, even before I get into the tools of like what can we immediately do, I'll address this idea of how do we balance inner peace with ambition. And I would argue to say that when somebody actually has inner peace, they are the most ambitious. And what I mean by that is when somebody has practiced a sense of contentment, of self-satisfaction, a sense of everything I need is always going to be provided for, just like the squirrels outside always seem to get fed, the birds in the sky always seem to get fed, they seem to find a nest. Like, all living entities are ultimately being provided for. What to speak of us as humans with the prefrontal cortex to actually be able to think about things and build amazing, complex thoughts and ideas. Everyone's going to be taken care of, as will I. And so the sense of self-satisfaction, say that 5 times fast, comes from an acknowledgement that everything I know I need is going to be taken care of, and some. From there, if we know everything's covered, then we actually can unapologetically do whatever we really want to do, or your quote unquote purpose. You can actually be driven because you're not stuck in a space of fear of what ifs. You're actually free of all of these attachments of things that could stop you from being self-satisfied, from being happy, from being content. If you start with practicing contentment, then you can be unapologetically, unabashedly focused on the things that you want to be, which, assuming that if you're actually satisfied, you're going to want to just help and contribute, because just like if you taste something delicious, all you want to do is tell everyone else, like, oh my God, you got to try this. It's like when you yourself get an experience with that, all you want to do is like share it with others. Please taste this. It's so good. And so what we learn is that in order to actually be driven and ambitious, not coming from a place of fear and lack, is you must start with that self-contentment anyway. And then from that space, you're going to want to give back naturally without any ulterior motive per se. And so the most driven people that are using sustainable fuel come from a space of contentment. Does that make sense?
Okay, that's definitely interesting. You mentioned practices as well. So what practices or exercises do you recommend for busy entrepreneurs or people actually to achieve that clarity and that focus as well? What do you do in your daily ritual?
Well, what I'll say is that no one doesn't have the time to meditate. No one doesn't have the time to meditate. That sounds very counterintuitive. As far as practices go, as far as like what can we immediately start to do is we got to meditate. But the question is what type of meditation? Because most people say, oh, I've tried I don't know, 99% of people I speak with are like, oh, I've tried meditating. I'm not any good at it. I don't really like it. My whole point is then you're doing the wrong meditation. It's like, it's not that you don't like to meditate. It's just you haven't found the right meditation yet. So the key fundamental practice is starting to control the mind, and we call that meditation. If we don't voluntarily practice controlling the mind will control you. I mean, we all know this. I don't have to preach it. It's like we all know the mind says, just eat one more cookie. It'll only be your 13th. You'll be fine. Just one more cookie. You don't need to really work. It's working out. We'll do that tomorrow. The mind, if you don't control it, it controls you. The way we can actually practice controlling the mind is by deliberately going into a space where you are telling the mind what to do as opposed to letting it tell you what to do. And the way we do that is by meditating. What that really means is bringing our attention to a single focus, bringing it and keeping it where we want it to be. There's various types of meditations out there, and I encourage people to try them on for size, but there's everything from just calming your central nervous system to doing breath work. I'm a big fan of all of these. The most effective meditation, according to the ancient yogic literatures, is what's called mantra meditation or japa. And I can briefly, I'll share it for anyone who wants to immediately try it, because it's all you need is a few minutes. If not, you can do this in 30 seconds. You can do it in 5 minutes. You can do it in an hour and a half. I like to do at least an hour and a half a day of this particular meditation. And if you get into mantra meditation, it's considered to be the highest of all meditations according to this yoga tradition, because what we're doing is we're focusing on mantras. Mantra is a Sanskrit word which we often use in English nowadays, which literally means man comes from mind and tra means to deliver or free. It means to free or deliver the mind. What we're doing is we're chanting sound vibrations that are focusing the mind through sound. There's a lot of things that catch the attention, but sound is the most catching, which is why when I talk, no matter what I do and I say, by hearing my snapping, our mind always gets taken to sound, and we have to bring it back to what we want to focus on. Just like if an ambulance drives by right now, no matter how much you're trying to focus on what I'm saying, ears, the attention, the mind goes towards the ambulance. Or if somebody screams or whatever the case might be. That's why you use an alarm clock to wake up instead of a oil diffuser, because sound carries consciousness. So what we're doing is we're chanting mantras, which take the attention through the most attention-grabbing sense, which is the ears, which is through sound. And we're focusing it not just on sounds that make you feel good, like a good song, but rather there's sound vibrations that these ancient sages from India say are not of this world. Rather, what they do is they free or deliver the mind, and they connect one with our highest sense of self, or divinity from within and divinity from without. And so there's different types of mantras. I'll just chant one, and you guys can Google it. And, anyway, we've got tons of free resources we can send you around this as well. But we'll give you one that you can just start to chant at any given time and start to practice. You might have heard of ones like Om, A-U-M, Aum. But there's ones that are even more effective, like I'll chant one, and I want everyone here, take a deep breath, release it through the mouth. I'm going to chant. I want you to just hear this mantra. We're just going to chant it once. And if you chant it over and over, what will happen is by bringing your mind to the mantra, to the sound of these sacred syllables, what you're doing is you're practicing. When the mind wanders, you bring it back. You bring it back just like you would any muscle. Here's an example of what one mantra sounds like. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare. Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Or Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. So these are examples of mantras that we could chant over and over. And all it takes is a couple, you do 10 mantras, you do 108 mantras, doesn't matter, but you just take a few and you keep bringing your mind back to this. The proof of the pudding's in the tasting. I won't even say more. Try it yourself and see what happens.
Are you saying anything when you're saying those mantras? Like, what's the meaning behind the words that you're saying?
These two examples. So with these two examples, we have, so let's take Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. So the Sanskrit, we're talking about Om. Om is a combination of three Sanskrit letters, which is A, U, and M. In short, it indicates everything in existence, which means there's units of consciousness, aka souls, spirits, us, the real us that's driving around the body and the mind, the real you. And then there's nature around us, that which we can perceive outside of ourselves. And then there's divinity. Those are really the only three things you can experience in life. It's like I'm a self thinking and observing things. There's something outside that I can see that's temporary and that comes and goes. And then there's something that isn't temporary. It doesn't come and go. Divinity that permeates beyond matter. So that's what Om means in a nutshell. And then Namo means offer respects. Just like if anyone's taking a yoga class, they say namaste. This idea, it means I offer my respects. And then Bhagavate refers to divinity, the possessor of all opulences, the reservoir of all opulence and beauty, etc. And then Vasudevaya means there's divinity outside and there's divinity who's representative in every atom, all pervasive. Vasudevaya. So the idea is I offer my respects to divinity who's everywhere and beyond everywhere, in other words. Or the Maha Mantra, which is I offer, literally just means please engage me in service. Please engage me in divine service. That's the idea.
Wow. Very deep and interesting. In terms of like what's going on in the world and whatnot, sometimes there's a lot of like, given the war, there's 2 wars going on, like there's a lot of uncertainty in this world. And you seem to be very calm and still peaceful and happy. So what ways does embracing uncertainty lead to a more like resilient mindset, especially in business and in life? Because I know that you seem to be super calm no matter what you do. So tell us a little bit, like give us some tips on that.
Well, don't get me wrong. I'd like to be always calm. Unfortunately, the mind sometimes does its thing. Oftentimes, actually. But the way that we can navigate is first by understanding the premise that the one certainty is uncertainty. In other words, the one thing we can be sure of is that there's going to be change. Everything around us is changing. Everything from our own body, every cell at every second is changing. What to speak of the world around us is changing. And so change is inherently precarious or uncertain or unsteady. And so if we understand this principle, and that is everything around us is going to be changing, is always going to be in flux. The first step of understanding that helps us be free from the idea that we want things to not be uncertain. Let me say it more clearly. We may feel like we want things to be more certain, but as soon as we understand things are never going to feel uncertain, things are always going to be in flux and in change, we now accept things for what they are. And there's a freedom in that. There's the freedom to know, that's right. I'm never in control of these things. Oh, yeah, that's right. That's just what happens around me. Things are always in flux and in change. And so that is the premise. We then look to how to be okay, how to practice being okay with that change, with all these things that are going on around us from, you mentioned from war to the most amazing things that are happening to the most not amazing things that are happening around us. And ultimately, it comes to a sense of practicing being in control of what we can be in control of. And that really is one thing and one thing only, and that's the mind. There's so few things we can control. What can we control outside of our own body? Practically nothing. Practically nothing. I mean, in terms of other people, we might be able to control objects, but even objects come and go. Things only have a certain amount of years, minutes, decades, centuries that they're around until, Earth takes structure and then it breaks back down. The one thing that we can control is our mind. And so to the extent that we practice being the controller of our mind, again, so our mind doesn't control us, we now are in control of the most thing we can be in control of, per se. And so to the extent that we practice, I'm the boss of my mind, while simultaneously understanding I have no control, these things around me are going to be changing with or without me, that provides us a sense of full responsibility and full agency to be able to act and respond in this life in a way that we're going to be okay, because we know it's outside of my control and I am working on the one thing that is within my control.
So it's a lot of just monitoring your thoughts and being mindful of your thoughts, I'm guessing, as well. And that's also,
that's definitely essential.
Yeah. Okay, cool. In terms of gratitude, what role does gratitude play in alleviating stress and fostering a positive mindset as well?
I mean, if I were to say, if there's only one thing to take away from this particular session, I would say it's gratitude is the most important thing in your life. Not you. You know this, Linda. I mean to say for anyone listening, and I remind this to myself on a daily basis, is there's arguably nothing more important than practicing gratitude because, as they say, I think it was Seneca, gratitude is the mother of all virtues. Something along those lines. And this idea that gratitude comes from the feeling that I am receiving something that I don't necessarily deserve. I am getting grace, love, compassion. Like I am receiving something beyond what I necessarily deserve. That feeling of gratitude, which is inherently connected to love, because if you love someone, you're grateful for them. Like there is no love without gratitude. There's no gratitude without love. That feeling of gratitude, when we cultivate it, not only are we going to feel more grateful, because appreciation appreciates. In other words, the more appreciation, gratitude you have, the more gratitude you're going to feel over time, because where attention goes, energy flows. In other words, what you focus your mind on, you are going to find more opportunities in your life based off the thing you're focusing your mind on. And so if you're focusing on gratitude, you're going to find more opportunities to be grateful for. You're going to train your brain to focus on the good because it needs no help when focusing on the bad. It does that automatically. Your mind's going to tell you all the time what's not working. So therefore, in order to control the mind, we first and foremost always spend our focus and attention on gratitude as that essential emotion to feel, because just by putting in that space of gratitude, you can't feel negative emotions. Like if you're steeped in gratitude, you are not going to be affected by these things that take you outside of our aligned self, our core self, our centered self. So there's arguably nothing more important than spending time on gratitude and feeling gratitude.
Beautiful. On the flip side of that, though, everyone has emotions and whatnot. So there are also negative emotions and low frequency energy. So how do we deal with that in our lives, especially, when we're especially entrepreneurs or when we're in the workforce or in our personal lives when we're around people that are stressed, angry, or even ourselves internally? How do we do that and flip that low energy, low frequency around and turn it into a more positive one?
Well, I would say there's two ways to navigate this. Number one is to use it as fuel. And what that really means is we never, ever want to repress or suppress our emotions. In other words, we want to express them. We don't want to just force them in to pretend they're not there, because that's not going to work. We're just putting it back to deal with it later.
But what if it's too much of that negative and we're expressing too much like stress and anger as well? Like sometimes it happens. What if we're doing it too much?
Yeah. So if there's too much, then I'll say there's like a caveat, which I'll say is like the second. But for most, I think most quote unquote negative emotions like stress or whatever. Stress itself isn't the emotion it's experienced, but let's say sadness, let's say anger, let's say disappointment, whatever the feeling itself might be. A lot of those can be used as, I would call them unsustainable fuel, but they are fuel that can be engaged in such a way as to move you in a positive direction. I'll give you a couple examples what that is. The second step, it goes more towards your point, which is there are things that are going to be detrimental. There are emotions that are not necessarily ever helpful to express. An example being violence that might come from anger. Like there are healthy ways to express violence. Like I consider myself a very violent person, which sounds counterintuitive, but I'm capable of violence. I've spent time learning different, say, martial arts and skills to be capable, but I've learned how to control the violence in such a way that I don't let it necessarily overtake me. So like the violence is a good thing, but if you let anger result to uncontrolled violence, that's where it becomes detrimental. And there's other examples of that. So we want to first categorize, okay, what are the things that can be engaged that aren't detrimental, that can actually be used as fuel that move us into a direction to eventually we don't deal with those because we're processing them and working through them. And then what are the ones that we actually have to just reject and give up and do everything we can to not let it entertain. And usually I would say it's a percentage of how much that thing is controlling you. Example might be people are dealing with anger. Anger is sadness that isn't being properly expressed and dealt with. When you feel sad about something, then eventually it feels like anger in the mind and in the body. The way that you express anger, or you say the way you express sadness on the most superficial level, is through anger and expression, because typically anger comes out because it's some sense of I can control, or I can try to control, or I can try to influence the situation to go in the direction of how I want it, because I'm sad things aren't how I want. Somebody might say, I'm angry that you did that, but really it means I'm sad you didn't do the thing I wanted you to do. I'm sad you didn't do the thing I expected of you, whatever the case might be. So in this way, we want to start peeling back the layers to really get to the essential, what we call core wounds. This is a much bigger topic, but just to hit on it, it's the idea that in our childhood, we learn how to respond and react from those who raised us. And there's a bunch of amazing gifts that come out of that, and there's a bunch of challenges that come out of that. And so we always want to figure out what are those core wounds, those things that when others, we get triggered, because we always take personal self-responsibility. I am triggered. I have the issue. I get angry. I get fill in the negative emotion. We first want to understand, where does that come from, and give understanding. Oh, you know what? Mom used to get angry, and when she would, I would shut down and it would make me feel like I wasn't worthy. Again, there's a whole process we even teach around core wounds, which is like how to identify those. But the idea is, once you find out what that core wound is, what that thing is that triggers you, makes you triggered by what someone else does, then we can start to see, how do we adapt the behaviors or the practices to overcome or create new neural pathways to create a different response to that same stimuli, that same thing that when the stimuli happened, you got triggered and freaked out and got a negative response. How do we create a new pathway to a different type of response instead of reacting? So the idea being, if something is within our control and it's not overcoming us, then how can we use that as fuel? And so in examples, this thing makes me, I'm sad that I'm overweight, and that therefore what do I want to do? I want to leverage that sadness as a type of temporary motivation to let me get back in shape, or I'm sad that I fill in the blank. I'm sad that, and figuring out what that thing is and engaging it. The caveat being, if it's too intense, if it's too much, we must get accountability and support. In general, even for the first, accountability and support still going to be helpful, but we must get help. The idea that we can do anything by ourselves, it's just silly. Nothing happens by ourselves. We're a product of gifts that others are constantly giving and sharing with us. We must get the support that we deserve. And that is figuring out what accountability, what association we need to be around. Because if we're hanging out with people that have the qualities that you want, you will develop those qualities. Show me your friends, I'll show you your future. Your association is everything. We must surround ourselves with the people who are doing the thing we want to do. And then through osmosis, we start to develop those qualities, and then we're accountable to them to make sure we never let things go off the edge, if that makes sense. Much more I could share, but that's the overarching principle.
That's beautiful. That's very deep. Let's talk about fulfillment, and what advice would you give to someone seeking to find purpose and fulfillment beyond their material successes as well? Because, you hear about celebrities or people who are millionaires and they've got everything, yet they're not happy. I think, is it a matter of just being grateful? Like, how does one find fulfillment beyond all the material possession?
Well, I think gratitude is absolutely a big part of it. But really, when we're talking about fulfillment, we're talking about values. And if we're talking about what somebody values, because when we're talking about fulfillment, that's going to look different to each and every person. Like, what each person is going to need to feel fulfilled is going to be slightly different according to somebody's psychophysical nature. So then we have to look at what somebody values, because somebody can only feel fulfilled if they're in alignment with their values or in integrity. So when we're talking about identifying values, we're really just talking about philosophy. Like, what is somebody's life philosophy? And I would say the most simple, direct way of understanding how to be fulfilled as the preliminary to being fulfilled is having a proper conception of self. And what that really means is, we talked on this before, there's only three things that you can perceive of. One is you're a self, a spirit, a unit of consciousness, a soul. Give it whatever term you want. We're talking about the same thing. I think, therefore I am. This idea that I have a prefrontal cortex, which allows me to conceive of things. And I am a consciousness. I'm a conscious entity. And how do I know that? Because I'm talking about it, because I'm thinking about it, because I'm talking with you about it. You also are conscious, because vice versa. And so we know we're units of consciousness. We know that there's nature around us. That's why you and I, Linda, we could point to the same thing. We both call it the same thing. we both see and perceive the same thing. There's something outside of my brain. And then there's some source of this all. There's some source of self. There's some source of this matter. Things don't come from nothing. I mean, that's just literally a grammatical, to say something comes from nothing is just a grammatical incongruency. It just doesn't make sense as a literally logical statement. Something comes from something. And so the idea is there's powers greater than us. And, you know, if you don't believe in a higher power, go into the middle of the ocean. It won't take you long to be like, okay, there's powers greater than me. Go spend some time in the sun. You'll be like, okay, this power is far greater than I am. So we must understand if there's powers greater, there is a highest of powers. What is that highest of powers? The highest of all powers conceivable, and this is what's taught for the ancient wisdom literatures of the East, is that if you spend time thinking of what could be the highest conceivable power, like the highest power anyone could possibly comprehend. We call this a triple OG, which means omniscient, omnibenevolent, and omnipotent. What that means is all loving, all powerful, and all knowing. The highest conception of divinity, of the highest power, would be one who knows everything, one who loves more than anything, and one who has the power to control it, or to allow everything, to control everything, to facilitate everything. And so if we understand that there is a power, there are powers greater than us, and then there must be, if there's hierarchy of powers, we must understand there is a highest of those powers, and the highest conceivable is all loving, all powerful, and all knowing. That means that there is a source there, out there, that not only knows exactly what you need, but loves you more than anything, and therefore wants you to have what you need, and is all powerful, and so can give you what you need. If we understand that, then there's a sense of peace that, oh, everything I ever need is going to be taken care of. Doesn't mean we don't act, which is the second step, but this is the preliminary. This is like, okay, I now understand what I need to be fulfilled, and that is everything I could possibly imagine for, and more than I can imagine, is available and is being provided as an opportunity at all times. Then you can actually practice fulfillment, which means, what are my unique gifts? How can I actually serve and contribute in this world so I can become a giver instead of a taker? That type of nuance takes a little bit of churning, we have exercises that we help people utilize to figure out what your purpose, dharma, fulfillment, whichever term you want to give it. There's ways to figure that out, but really it comes down to, with my unique psychophysical nature and gifts, what is the thing that I'm just inherently great at that I can use to improve the quality of life of others? Whatever that thing is, do that. That's where fulfillment comes.
That's beautiful. Like, who are your biggest inspirations, or do you have any mentors that you follow, books that you read?
Absolutely. How long do you have? Golly, I have a vast amount of resources of people that to learn from, different types of books. You can't see here, but I'm looking at a big old bookshelf. Lots of books. The most impactful person in my life is probably a name I don't think most people listening might have heard of, but it's a gentleman. His name is Vaisheshika Das. He's a international teacher of the Bhakti yoga lineage and tradition. Somebody who's in a lineage of where his teacher has a teacher has a teacher. It goes back thousands of years. Literally, you could track that. It's like pretty phenomenal to think of it, like unbroken chain of teachers. His presentation of philosophy of life, the philosophy of self, is I've yet to have met anyone that can explain it such a way so expertly. So anyway, Vaisheshika Das is amazing. Probably better than listing one off at a time. I actually have a whole list of my teachers, books, resources that I use for all of my free course material. I give everything away for free. I'm weird like that. I have tons of courses that are definitely worth, I could probably charge, I don't know, tens of thousands of dollars for the type of stuff we teach, but I give everything away for free. And in that, I have a whole acknowledgement stock where I break down all different teachers, all different books, resources, etc. So probably better I share that. That would be more efficient with time.
Yeah, definitely. Oh, well, hopefully everybody can go to check it out. Finally, where can people find you as well?
On any platform at Madu.life. So madhu.life. That's Madu.life. Madhu.life. Any platform you'll find me. That's my website. That's my socials, etc. What I like to do is, we have free everything, free community, free resources. I'm a big believer in value exchanges. I do believe that what people spend their time, money, and attention on is what they value the most. But I'm also a big fan of service, which means I like to make all this available so that anyone can also start to make money doing what they want. Anyone can improve their quality of life through their health, through their mindset, through their spiritual practices, etc. So I make all my course material available for anyone in our community. And so if anyone sends me, what I'll do is I want to make it special for you. If anyone sends me the word Linda, let's do this. Let's make it fun. Linda Monk. Or even just Linda's fine. If they come from you, not only will I give you access to our free community, which again has all this wonderful course material and brilliant community, but I have a little special gift I'll throw in for anyone who comes, but just from this podcast. So if somebody finds me on Madu.life, either through the website or through Instagram, any social media, you drop me the message, Linda Monk. I'll send you not only access to all of our content course material, but I'll also throw in a little gift.
Thank you. That's really inspiring. And I'm so grateful for your time, because that definitely can help benefit one's life. And I hope that you guys all found that very valuable as well. So if you did, please be sure to hit the like and subscribe button, because it does help the channel grow. Thank you so much for your time, Madhu. All the best with the course and your journey and living a fulfilling life.
Thank you so much, Linda.
Thank you.